Hey, I'm Rin. Welcome to my channel. So I was going to take a bit of a break from making videos because video editing is starting to feel more like a chore than fun anymore. There are way too many issues with the software I'm using. And then I got a new mic. So we'll be building Blade today. Yay! Okay, so fun story about how I got Blade for the first time. I was pulling for an Axa and I was heading towards Hard Pity when I saw the destruction icon and felt my soul leave me when I thought I got another Clara. Luckily it was just the old man instead. I have no regrets on getting him besides the fact that I lost my 50-50, but I also don't really use him that much anymore since I got Finan. I'm not done with him though, I just need to figure out a good team comp for him. Plus, I think I messed up in building him because what do you mean he keeps getting one-shotted by everyone for no reason? I'll figure it out as I go, I guess. But anyway, outside of my own history with this man, here is the build I made for him. I'm not completely sure what your group thinks about Critical Role or Blood Hunters in general, but I don't know. I like them and I've seen a few builds with Blood Hunters in mind. Just ask your DM beforehand if they'll allow this build or not. Anyway, here is what I have for him. Let's see what we have, shall we? So I decided that I wanted to write a story that was a little less like how I usually do. And for that mistake, I decided to make Blade a dampir. Now you would be asking me, Rin, what is a dampir? Well, I'm glad you asked, dear listener. They're vampires with a bit more choices, I guess. They're the undead with a hunger for the living. Those who overindulge themselves with such hungers risk losing control of themselves forever, becoming mindless beasts that only view others around them as prey. Kind of similar to the Mara and its effects on Blade, in a way. You get an increase in certain scores of your choosing. I went with 2 in strength and 1 into constitution. You have dark vision, you don't need to breathe, and you can climb up walls like a hecking spider. Oh, and you get fangs as well, like a vampire. Ain't that fun? Dampirs often originate from encounters with vampires, but not always. I decided to go with a very different story because of it, kind of connecting very loosely to the story I wrote for Dang Hun. Only a little bit though, I don't really remember what I wrote back then, and I don't feel like digging through a bunch of journals just to look for it. Anyway, moving on from Dampires, I can finally talk about the Blood Hunter class to you guys. So just a warning to you guys, it isn't really canonical material. It originated from Critical Role, and that's a big 50-50 for your DM if they will allow external materials into their games. However, if they do, this class really is just the Blade class. So Blood Hunters get abilities like Hunter's Bane and Crimson Rite as the basic components of their class. I'm not going to go too deep in depth with what these mean. There are much better videos out there that can explain this class in far more detail than I can. But I'll explain this part. I gave him the Rite of the Storm because there isn't any wind elemental rite for him to use, so lightning is close enough for me. I also gave him the dueling fighting class, and for his blood curses I went with mutual suffering, kind of similar to how as he loses HP he gets a follow-up attack along with it. And I also gave him the blood curse of the marked, which allows you to mark any enemy, and until the spell ends, any Crimson Rite attacks upon the creature will deal double the damage. Finally, after all of that, I can finally explain the order I gave Blade. That being the Order of the Profane Soul. It's the most warlocky of all the orders, but it's also the one that made quite a strange sense to me, if you wish to see Elio as a patron for the Celeron Hunters. Also, the idea of Blade's soul becoming corrupted by the Mara could make this a really interesting story beat as well. For the Profane Soul, you get an otherworldly patron, pact magic, and rite focus, in which your weapon becomes your spellcasting focus, as well as an enhancement to your rites. And here's where I went a little differently from my previous builds. Beforehand, I always went with Archfey when representing Elio as a mythical Fey creature who is unexplainable to their followers. For Blade though, the abilities of the Archfey patron didn't quite fit the fighting style or his mechanics, so I decided to deviate and go with Hexblade instead. If you want to run a Stellaron Hunter team, you could ignore this part or explain it away as that it is an Archfey patron, but you'll be using Hexblade mechanics to keep it in a more lore-accurate way. I actually did give him a multi-class, but only for a very specific element that comes with the class. So I gave him 5 levels in Blood Hunter, and the remaining 2 levels I placed into Barbarian. It's to give him access to rage and reckless attacks, since it fits his fighting style very well. Be warned though, if you use rage, you won't have access to any of your spells, but it won't matter too much with your other abilities intact. And if your DM doesn't like blood hunters at their table, you can go with a pure barbarian build for him instead. Now for his ability scores, strength needs to be his highest, then constitution, wisdom, charisma, and then intelligence, and his dexterity will have to be his lowest. For his background, I kind of just saw it and went with it, that being the dead background. I know there might be better backgrounds for him compared to this one, but I wanted to try something interesting when writing his backstory. That and it gives him proficiency in intimidation and history, which fits him really well. Speaking of intimidation, I also gave him the menacing feat. It increases his charisma score, adds a double proficiency in intimidation, and you can frighten your enemies with your menace for 1 turn. Though if you fail, the enemy won't be able to be frightened for the next 1 hour. For languages, I gave him Draconic as a reference to his relation with Dungfen/Dunghun, Undercommon as his work as a Stellaron hunter, and Sylvan as a reference to Elio himself. For proficiencies, I gave him Survival and Nature because the man cannot die, and Abundance curses, Athletics because he's incredibly powerful, and Investigation because he's quite intelligent, and I wanted to show that part of him through this part of the build. Sadly, you cannot get proficiencies in smithing tools with this build. I would ask your DM if it's allowed for you to add this one to your proficiency. I don't see a reason why they'd reject it, but just ask them beforehand if that's allowed or not. Finally, moving on to his magic, here are my recommendations that I would give him with all things considered. These are just what I think would work for him and the ideas of what I think would suit Blade the most. First up, Toll the Dead as his damage cantrip, just because I think that would be very handy for him. Another is Hellish Rebuke, which you can see as a counter, something similar to his follow-up attack. But this time it's when another person attacks him first. And also I gave him Circle of Wind because he uses the wind element, and it gives a +2 to your AC against ranged attack when you're within the vortex. And finally, for his equipment, I guess I gave him a sword of some kind. I would recommend that as his main weapon, but I'm not sure what else to add. But moving on from that, this is the story I wrote for him, with some creative liberties added in for the sake of making him a dampir character. I hope you guys don't mind it. I'll try my best to make him as interesting as possible. Well, here it is then. Do you remember? It was a voice, faded, lost in the sea of fog that came over him since that day. Do you remember now? The pain that rushed through his body that day. The sound of someone shouting a name he can no longer remember as his own. A woman was screaming at him. At both of them. Her eyes filled with horror as a defiled form rose from her grave. But he was practically gone by then, his mind lost in the darkness as voices faded further and further away. He was in so much pain, blood dripping from his eyes, mouth, his nose. He felt like he was drowning until his soul was yanked back by a force he could not understand. Oh, the suffering, the madness that ran through his body as he launched himself towards them. Those people, those who he swore to protect and those who swore to protect others. They all seemed the same to him then, a broken sword clutched in his hand as he hacked at them. The sound of screaming all around him, and yet he could still hear the distinct sound of someone begging for him to stop. Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, you have to. His voice was cut off by the arrival of soldiers, ready to bring the criminals who defiled a gravesite and brought such a curse upon their people. He fled then, leaving the Dragonborn to face the consequences of their foolish actions, and a rage-induced woman who could no longer see the light of the new day anymore. He ran, he stumbled, he screamed in agony as he begged for death to finally take him. and then he heard it. A gentle melody that lulled his cursed mind to rest. The voice of a cursed being similar to him, who understood the horrors that he had been reborn as. You are no longer human, nameless one. You are something forsaken by this world. The voice spoke to him, and he opened his eyes again. He sat up upon the bed and looked around the room as the darkness felt as if it was staring back at him. She was in a corner, smiling at him, as if she had seen the most amusing thing ever in her life. You must remember now, the feeling of death. You must bring it to them. He couldn't help but laugh at such an order from a woman like her. He rose up and began to move at a pace filled with rage and madness that now belonged to him. The only thing that was left within him was simply unexplainable malice. And that's the end of that. This video has been taking a long time to make, and if it's not audio issues, it's the video issues. I'm so done right now. The fact that I was hoping to take a break and then I got a new mic, it's definitely something else, isn't it? Ain't that ironic, don't you think? But either way, I'm glad that this video has been finished, and I'm going to take a while. Anyway, I've been saying too much now. I'm really tired. Thank you all for watching this video, and I hope you guys tolerated it. Like and subscribe if you like, and I'll see you all next time, hopefully. Take care.